Hello and welcome to Control-Delete Tutorials. Today we're going to be looking at how to create a skybox for Unity. So if we look at the scene, these are some Unity assets that I got from the Unity Asset Store. They're just called Shantytown. You can import those different objects in. But what I want to focus on is creating the skybox. So right now in Unity we got this very default sort of skybox. Doesn't have a lot going on, it works fine. It's a nice skybox. But you know, what if we want to have clouds and stuff like that? So the type of skybox that we're looking at creating is what is known as a cubemap, or created from a cubemap. So I just want to bring up some reference materials here just so we can kind of see. So what a cubemap is, and this we can kind of see here what it's doing, is it's generating an image to either be used as reflections or used as a skybox in that case. And the way this is put together is there are different images that are tiled together, and we can see here we have a image for the right, left, top, bottom, front, and back, and those have X, Y, and Z coordinates with them, so we can see X, Y, and Z. And in Unity, our Z direction and our Y direction are different than that of 3ds Max, which we'll also be using. And you can see all the software I've opened down here, which we'll be using. And so our left and right values are our X, our top and bottom in Unity are going to be our Y's, and our front and back are going to be our Z. And then when all of these images are put together, they will create a seamless, or hopefully a seamless, that's what we're shooting for today. There is usually some cleanup, so I'm going to go through this as fast as I can, and hopefully I can make something seamless that we can look at. But these images that we have down there, this just shows you a couple of different layouts that you'll normally see, but these images are laid out in a way that the image that's used for negative X, or our left value, is going to merge into our front, and then to our right, and then to our back, and then hopefully our top and bottom will also be seamless. So I'd like to show you the way that I will typically approach something like this, and creating something like this. So we're going to start off in 3ds Max, and I'm going to create a box. Now if you're doing this in Maya, it's going to be basically done the same way, just different tool set. So I'm going to start out with a box, and the reason I do that is because it's 6-sided and it's called a cube map, so it just makes sense to do that. So I'm going to create my box, and I'm going to make the box have the same length, width, and height segments here. So I'm just going to type in, let's go with, I'm going to do 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000. And something else I want to show you, under Customize, Unit Setup, my units are set up as generic, but my system unit is set up as centimeters. The math is a lot easier that way when we're using centimeters, so that's why I stick with that. My length segments here are going to be 1, 1, and 1, and I'm going to go to my hierarchy panel, because by default when I create an object in the top view in Max, was I in the top view? Let me make sure. I'm going to do that again just to make sure. I might have been in the front view when I created that. Okay, so I'll do 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. Apologize for that. But when I generate this object, I'm going to turn my grid on here. It's actually on. It's smaller than my box right now. But the pivot point for this is always going to be created on the bottom. So I'm just going to go to Hierarchy, Effect Pivot Point Only, Center to Object, so it's going to center it. And now I can go down to my X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to type in 0, 0, and 0, just to move this to the center of my scene. And so from here I want to do a UV unwrap. And for this, I'm actually not going to use this pattern, and hopefully I don't regret this later, but well, I will end up using this for the final. But let me just show you how I'm going to approach this. So I'm going to go to my modifiers, and I'm going to first start off with just doing a UVW map. And I'm going to set this to face, I'm going to right click, convert to edit poly, and I'm going to put a unwrap UVW on it. So the reason I did the first step was just to make sure that every single side here is currently not welded to any other part. So you can see here, based on my X direction here, if I rotate this around, so this is going to be that negative X, so that panel, which if we go back to our reference here, negative X, positive Z, positive X, negative Z. So we're going to just follow that pattern just to make this easier. So I'm going to take my negative X, I'll move that over. This one should be my positive Z, so I'm going to leave that right where it's at. This top one here will be the positive Y, so I'll move that above. The bottom one is my negative Y, and then I've got my positive X. I don't know why things are jumping around on me here. And then I've got my negative Y, which is on my back here. Okay, so something I want to make sure of. I'm going to attach these all together, but before I do that, I'm going to click one, and I want to make sure that I'm just going to move these all out of the way for a second, just so they're away from the grid here to make it a little easier for you to see. I'll just maximize for now. So what I want to make sure is whenever I click this center part, it's going to highlight the edges that are shared between these different panels here. So I can see if I select this, my bottom one, the blue is on the side, which probably means this needs to be rotated 90 degrees. If you're trying to rotate right now and it's not snapping to 5-degree increments, let's make sure you have on angle snap and it'll fix that. Alright, and then this one, we can see that that one's on the top there, so I'll rotate that one around as well. So let's take a look here. Okay, all my tops are lighting up, all the bottoms of these ones are lighting up. I select that, this lights up, that lights up, and that one. So these are all set up appropriately now, which is good. So now I'm going to go in and move, and I'm going to move these. You know what? Let's try something. When I was working on this earlier, I typically will, now I'll stick to that, I don't want to mess anything up. I typically will weld these together, but I found that Unity actually, or Mudbox will actually account for a little bit of bleeding around the edges of what I paint, and I don't want to mess up any of my tiling, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this. So I'm going to get these as close as I can get them. I'm just going to lay them over top of each other. So I'm zooming in pretty far here. And I first just start by lining it up and then zooming in and getting a little bit closer. And just get as close as I can there. And I'm probably going a little bit too far with lining up how close I'm getting this, but I like things to be perfect, so, or as close as I can get them. Alright, it's pretty good. And finally, that one. And then I have the one on the bottom yet. By the way, if you don't have Mudbox, or if you don't have, the programs I'm using, if you want to get into this business, it's good to get these or something like it. So if you're using Blender, that's fine. If you're using ZBrush, again, that's fine. I'm just using what I currently have and what I teach at the college that I teach at. Also, I'm using educational versions for these, so I'm able to get them from Autodesk for free. So if you're a student or something like that, you can sign up for a student account and get these softwares. At least you can in the United States. I'm not certain about other countries. I don't know how that works. But hopefully you can get them. Okay, so under Vertex, I'm going to select all of my vertices here, and I'm going to right click and say just weld selected. I'll know it works because now I don't have the green border edges here anymore, or the green seam edges. These turn white, which lets me know they're welded together, which is what I want. So now I can just simply select all of these and just say pack, and it packs them in. Now typically whenever we're unwrapping, we want to use as much of this space as possible, but based on the shape here and based on what I'm using this for, this is going to be just fine for what I'm doing. One thing I want to do though is sometimes when you pack it can move things around, so I just want to make sure when I click on the top, my top is selected. When I click on the bottom's selected, and it is. So I'm going to convert to editable poly. If you have the drop down to the side, I just have my shortcuts here because this is usually what I'll use. Okay, so converted to editable poly. So something I want to do now is I unwrapped it that way, but what I'm actually going to do is the way I bring this into Mudbox to paint it is I'm going to tessellate this and turn it into a sphere, because that will best represent what I'm looking at on a sky map. So to do that, typically I would do turbo smooth, but I'm actually finding that the problem with using turbo smooth with the unwrap here, so I'll just do this for instance, is now whenever I apply my unwrap again, you can see that it's smoothed out everything and it's kind of rounded out here. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to remove turbo smooth, and instead what I'm going to do, and what I found works really nice, is instead I'm going to use tessellate. So I'm going to use tessellate. I'm going to turn the tension all the way down here. I want to make sure I'm also on polygon mode. It will usually default to faces, so I want to click over there. If you see it looking like this, that's not what you want. So we'll go to tessellate, polygon, edge. My tension here is going to be set to 0 because I don't want it to distort any, and I want to give myself 16 polygons on each side basically, just so I can get a nice round sphere shape here in a second. So I'm just going to tessellate and set iterations to 2. If you want to do more, that's fine. I just find 2 works fine for what I'm using. So I'm going to convert this. Actually, no, I'm not going to convert yet. So the other thing that I'm going to apply is spherify. And the spherify modifier takes whatever you have and tries to turn it into a sphere. And so you can see what it's doing there. So what's nice about doing it this way is I'm going to end up getting exactly the same sort of look here, and my UVs are actually going to be what I want them to be. Now I could come through and, you know, put a relax on here. There's relax. If I wanted to organize these a little bit better. And what's funny is it actually gets rid of the round shape. So the one thing that you could always do again, which again is going to seem a little silly, but I can spherify. And if we look at the difference between the two spherifys, it's fixing the kind of distortion between the different panels. And so that looks pretty good. So I'm going to convert this to an editable poly, and now I'm going to apply my unwrap UVW. You don't have to do this, but I'm doing this just to show you that it's kept all of my lines here nice and straight, which is ideally what I want, and is very important. So I'm going to continue doing that. So I'm going to just close that out. I don't need that back on there. And this is going to get sent over to Mudbox now, so I can paint on it. So I'll use the send to feature, send to Mudbox, and send as a new scene. If you don't have 3ds Max, if you're working in Blender or another program, what you're actually going to want to do is export and export. I'm going to use export selected because I just have one object, or just export. And I'm going to export as file type OBJ. And then I'll go into Mudbox and I'll import that in as an OBJ, and I'll use that. But since I'm using Autodesk 3ds Max and Autodesk Mudbox, they work together. So I can just go to send to Mudbox, send as new scene. And when I do that, it exports it, and I come into Mudbox. This was one I was just testing out earlier, and there we go. So there's my sphere brought in. So normally Mudbox is good because I can sit here and I can sculpt and also paint. But we're just going to be painting on this, so I don't have to worry about sculpting at this point. Before I begin painting on this, what I want to do is say, let's get some references. So I went online, I have Photoshop open here, and I found some cloud images. And some of them you can see are black and white, and I've actually done this with the images. And the reason I've done that is because we're going to end up using a stencil. And the stencils in Mudbox, the way they work is they will overlay an image over top here, and it'll allow me to paint in the light areas, and then in the black areas it won't paint. So I don't want to paint the sky on my image, I want to paint the clouds. So that's why I'm using this. So I just wanted to explain that. So what I've gone through and kind of done here is, and I'll just show you how I did this one. I'll do it with the other ones here. So I found this image, and these are stock images that I had found. And I'm just going to crop out the ground because I don't need that. And I'm trying to find cloud pictures that have the horizon in there because I want to paint the horizon into my skybox. So I'm going to go crop that out. And I'm going to go to, out of my way, select color range. I'm going to select the color blue here, and I'm going to try to get as much of the blue in the image as I can get. I want to leave a little bit of that blue in there though. Okay, so there's that. And actually, let me go through and I'm going to Control D. I'm going to select this again. I don't really want to select too much of down here. That's a little better. And I'll just go ahead and use my lasso tool and lasso out these areas down here that it's selected that I want to keep. And I'll just go in and go to Image, Brightness, Contrast, bring the brightness down here. And then what I'm going to do is, and I just do that so I can make the sky much darker than the clouds, is I'm going to desaturate, and then Image, Adjust, Levels. I'm going to bump up my black to where it's really taking a lot of the sky out of the image. And I can do the same thing with the gray here. I don't want to go too far with it. And that's pretty good. So that'll be my black and white image here, which I've already got one saved. I'll just save that one. So that one, go ahead and save. So I'm trying to get a couple different ones that I can use as stencils. That way I'm not constantly getting the same exact cloud patterns in my image. Okay, close that. That one I already did. So I'll do the same thing here. Oh, that's annoying. Select color range, and I'm going to try to take as much of the blue out of the image as I can. Brightness, contrast, bring that down. Control D to deselect there, and then adjust, desaturate, and then levels. And just try as much as possible to get as much of the sky out of the background there as we can. So I'll just be left over with clouds in my image. Save as. I'm just going to make these black and white. And then this one's called Clouds Top. So I wanted to find an image of what the clouds look like when you look straight up at them, because I can't paint the same sort of horizon clouds on the top of the skybox because it'll look weird. The clouds don't look that way. So that's why I found the other one here. So I'll start off with color range, and I'll just remove or darken the sky a bit more before desaturate. It's pretty good. So desaturate. And the reason I desaturate is so that way I'm not also painting the color from this image into the stencil. adjust, levels, bring the black up to where it meets the black of the image. That's pretty good. If you have trouble finding these type of images, I mean, it's just a Google image search, but you can always just pause the video here, use the snipping tool. Once it pops up, say new, and you could just take my images straight out of the video basically and save those. But you can find all these on just stock photo sites for clouds. Okay, close that one. I'll fix the last one here. Image, adjust. Oh, whoops, color range. This is a really big image, actually. Image, adjust. Come on. Getting a little bit of lag here. Control D, image, adjust, desaturate. Might have to make this image a bit smaller. And then finally, come on, levels. I have a lot of programs open too, which is kind of crazy of me. Alright, so we'll just go with that. So file, save as. Actually, let me change the size of that one, because it must be a huge, yeah, that's a really huge image. Image size. Wow, yeah, that's huge. So I'm actually going to set this to 4,000. Ought to be good. I don't need the image to be that big, because the texture map I'm going to use isn't even that large. And paste. Oh, BW. Save. Okay. And I'll close that just so we're not worried about this. Just minimize Photoshop for now. Alright, so painting. So the way I'm going to start this is I'm going to go to my Layers tab. I'm going to go to Paint, and I'm going to create a new paint layer. I'm going to go really large for this, because if this is 4096 and you know my unwrap, let me just save, we'll call this base color. And if you know that my UVs, you know, if this is 4096, this is going to be a lot smaller here, and I don't want to deal with this getting really pixelated, so that's why I'm going to end up going the largest texture size I can here. So I'm going to start off with simply going into my paint tools, and I'm going to select my paintbrush. I'm going to pick a color for my sky, so I'm just going to start out with maybe like a purpley blue color. And I'm going to go pretty dark for this to start with, and I'm going to flood the paint layer with this, so that'll color the entire thing. Under material presets, see, I don't want this to be shiny while I'm looking at it. I'm just going to pick one of my other material presets here. Actually, let's see how that, it's lightening that up a bit too much. This one's pretty good. Okay, that way I can still kind of make out the wireframe here. So I'm starting out with this dark blue color. This is going to be my horizon, the center of my wireframe, which I know is kind of hard to see now, but as I paint more it's going to get better. And I'm going to pick a light blue color. And I'll set my strength to be really low and my brush really large. And let's change my fall off here to this softened brush. Should default to that in Mudbox, but so I'm able to kind of come in here and just start painting along the horizon. And I'm not so much worried about the bottom part here because it's probably not going to be seen in game, depending on how your game is set up. You can always paint something down there if you want, but I'm trying to do this relatively quick. Now I'm going to go to my blur tool and set it really large, and I'm going to start blurring. Let's see, turn this up a bit. I might even go a little bit higher. Yeah, okay, that's a little better. Just kind of blur this all together. And then I can add in different colors and kind of blur them as well. So I'll go back to my paintbrush. You know, maybe I'll, I don't know, pick more of a medium blue. And come back across the, I'm going to turn my strength a little higher now. The horizon here and kind of hit this. The nice thing about Mudbox is these paint layers, as I sit here and do more colors, like if I want the horizon to come up a little higher, I have that purple color back in here. So I can just easily come in and, you know, if I want the horizon to be a little higher, I can kind of do that. I'm going to keep it the way it was though. And then I'm just going to paint this part up here. It's a bit brighter. And then I'm going to blur. I actually don't know if you can blur from... No, you can't. I was going to see if you could fill paint layer. That'd be nice. Alright. I might go back in and brighten up this area because it is a little bit dark still. Once I get the clouds in there, it'll also brighten it up, so I can do that. And if you want to see what your color is actually looking like, because this isn't the way it truly looks, I'm going to blur the horizon a bit more. I can always go to display and say flat lighting, and this will show me what it actually looks like. So I'm not seeing any of the shadows being displayed from Mudbox, which is nice. And just kind of paint that up. Alright. And so the way we've been doing this, we shouldn't end up getting any seams in between here because all of these parts are pretty much welded together, which is good. So now I'm going to go to my stencil and I'm going to load in those images that I created. So I can just click the button here and go to Add Stencil. And it's going to start browsing. And so I'll just go to where I save all my stuff to. So I have all my stuff here saved in my 3ds Max scenes folder. And so, can I load in? Yeah, I can do multiple. Okay. So I'm going to load those all in. And so, come on. I have a lot of programs open, so. So those are all loaded in here. So I'm going to go ahead and just start with the one for the top, so you can see how this is all laid out. I'm just going to rotate my... so if I want to change the size here, because the stencil's pretty big, scale is the one I'm going to be using, so I can hold S and rotate in the right click. So S, right click, and I can make this smaller. And so now I'm going to change my paintbrush to be white. But something else that I need to do, I'm going to create a new layer because I don't want to mess up any of the gradient that I've been creating here. So I'm going to do a new layer, and I'm just going to call this clouds, just so we can kind of see what this looks like first. Okay? And I'm going to start painting in my clouds that are on top. I'm just kind of going to go through and I don't like that last brush stroke there. Maybe turn my strength down a little. I'm trying to not get the very edge here. Okay, so I'll turn that stencil off just so we can see what we got, see if we like it. Okay, so that's the top part. Looks alright. Now I'm going to do the other ones. So that's my top. Alright, so I'm going to kind of line this up just under my horizon here and start painting this in here. And I'm not worried about getting that line on the bottom. If if it really bothers me, I can end up just coming in and I can just come in and blur the bottom there. So just so I can kind of continue painting the horizon there. I'll get the other side here. Let's see what that looks like. Trying to see what clouds I'm on here. I think I'm right around here. And so I can just paint that part in. And then I can switch to a different one. And start painting those in from that image. That's pretty good. Switch to one of the other ones. And then the last one. Alright, let's turn that off. And yeah, that looks alright. It's a very cloudy day. So I'll just go with blur. And I'm going to turn this back down. And this really isn't going to make that much of a difference because we're probably not even going to see this area down here. It's just mostly for me, I guess. Okay. I'll turn the wireframe off here so we can get a good look at it. Man, we don't see any seams here, which is good. So before I finish this up, what I want to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to flatten it to UV space. And I'm going to do that so I can paint a solid color on. So I'm going to do a new layer and just call this reference. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go to UVs and maps, and I'm going to flatten to UV space. And so when I do that, it flattens my image out so you can see what those textures actually look like. And so the reason I do that is because I've already filled this in with a specific color, but I want to be able to see this in Photoshop easily and where my edges are here. So in the reference one, I'm just going to pick a color, doesn't matter what. I'll go with green. And I'm not going to flood paint layer because I don't want to fill the entire layer. Oops, thought I picked green. Oh, duh. Okay, and I'm just going to paint that in all the way. And then I'll just turn that off, and I'm going to save my file, which I should have saved a long time ago. Let's call this Skybox demo. And that's also going to save out these individual images. And I'll just take a second there to finish up. Okay, so now I'm going to merge these visible ones since I've already got the ones here. I'm going to export them. So I'm going to say merge visible. It's going to put those together. I'm going to export selected, which was that one, and come back to 3ds Max and save that out. Scenes, Control Delete, Skybox, and this will be of type, I like Targa, that's just the one I default to using. So I'm going to call this just Skybox Raw. And then I'm going to turn this back on, and I'm going to go to export. Sorry, brain just stopped working there for a second. Skybox reference. I'm going to save that out. Because this is going to show you the amount of bleed that I actually have over top of my image. And the final thing is, I'm going to come back to Max. I'm actually done in Mudbox, so I'm just going to save this and close it out just to free up some computer space. So back in Max, I'm going to go to my unwrap, so I'm going to put that back on. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to export or render my UV template just to give you an idea of where my UVs are. So I want to set these to be the same size as my textures, 4096 by 4096. And I'll render that out, and you'll be able to see that it's got the wireframe here. So I'll save that, and my computer is really not liking me right now. It's going, no, there's too much stuff. Too much is open. Okay, 3ds Max. And will my. That's weird. Where am I? Documents, 3ds Max. Okay, that was really weird. I don't know what we were seeing there. Scenes, Skybox, and this is just going to be Skybox UVW, and that's just going to be another Targa file. And for the target file, I want to save it as 32 bits per channel and pre-multiplied alpha. And I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to save my max file too while I'm at it. So I can go ahead and close down max as well, because I'm basically done with it as well. Documents, 3ds max, scenes, Skybox, and this will just be Skybox box sphere. Just so I have that. The nice part is that Mudbox file that I have, I can go in there and paint any map on it now and be able to use that. I don't have to go through this whole process every time, just for the initial time that I do it. So it is a bit of a long process there. So I can go ahead and close Max now, saving some more space here. So now we're going to step over into Photoshop, and I'm going to open up my files here so we can kind of see them. Alright, so we've got Skybox Raw, Reference, and Skybox UVW. Alright, so just going to drag these to the side here for a second. So here's my painted map, and here's that reference file. So the reference file, I'm just going to take it, I'm going to hold shift, I'm going to drag it into my other image here, and I'm just going to close that out. Then my other one here, I'm going to do the same idea, dragging it in. As soon as it'll let me. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm dragging this in, and I'm just going to set this on a difference layer, or difference blending mode, just so I can show you in Mudbox, it's actually painting a little bit outside of our image, of our original UVs that we had set up. It's not necessarily a problem, but we have to make sure we crop our images appropriately. So what I'm going to do now is, and you can kind of see how this is painted outside of it. I don't want this to end up creating seams in my image, so I'm first going to try, once I can zoom back in here, dragging out rulers, and I'm going to drag them out and get them as close as possible to the wires that I have here, or the seams that I have here in my texture. That's pretty close. What I want to make sure is whenever I select and it snaps, I want to make sure it snaps to the inside of this and doesn't go outside of the seams here. So that's what I was just testing there. Okay. So we'll scroll down and zoom in here. Okay. My other seams are going to be right here. The other nice thing is I can just always keep this image and not have to worry about resetting up this part either. This is like a one-time setup thing, because then I can just bring my other skyboxes in here and reuse the same setup. I can just bring it in and drag it into my background layer. So that makes that handy. But for a first time setup, you know, it's a little more of a headache. Alright, let's see. And then the tops and bottoms. Alright, I think that covers all of, yeah. Okay, so I can go ahead and turn that off and turn my sky back on. So now I need to save out all of the images here individually. So I want to make sure I have under view, I want to make sure that snap is turned on and I can snap to guides, because I just set up all these guides. It would be silly if I didn't use them. But one of the things that you'll notice is, again, this bleeding that I have around the edges. And this shouldn't cause an issue, but I want to make sure that if it does, it's easy to come back here and I can just reset my guides and crop to that. But my UVs are set up to where it uses the interior part, so we're going to start with that. And so I'm going to save each of these as they are here. So I'll have positive Y, negative X, positive Z, negative or positive X, negative Z, negative Y. So I can just simply select, go to Image, Crop, File, Save As, and this will be Skybox. I'm going to call this Day or Cloudy Day, something like that. And then my one on top, if we remember, is my positive Y. So I'm just going to type POS, capital Y, and that'll be a Targa file. And actually, if I wanted, no, I'll just leave it as that. So save that out. I'm just going to do 24 bits per pixel, and I'm going to hit Control Alt Z, which will allow me to go back to my original size here before I cropped it. And now I'm going to get the next side, and I'm going to do this for all the sides, save out individual images. So go to Image, Crop, File, Save As, Targa, and this one is going to be negative X. So keep my same naming convention here, but I'm going to do neg X and save. Control Alt Z to go back. Might have to hit it a couple times to undo far enough back. Image, crop, save as, Targa. This one should be positive Z. Yep. POS capital Z. And select the next part here. Image, crop, file, save as. This one is positive X. And just get the rest of these. This one should be negative Z. Yeah, I couldn't remember where we were. Negative Z, and one more on the bottom. You can see the one on the bottom is all basically the same color because we didn't really paint anything there, but it's still important to have. Image, crop, save as, Targa, and then negative Y. and then I'll just save this now as Skybox cloudy day raw. Okay, so the final part. All of those images that I just made are probably not square images. And they're probably not power of 2 images. So I want to do that. So I'm going to select all the ones I just created. And I want to change them over so they are power of 2 numbers, which means they are divisible by 2, or multiples of 2. So I'm going to go to Window, Actions. I'm going to record an action that does this. So I'm going to create a new folder in my actions, and I'm going to call this Skybox 1024x1024. Actually, that's what I wanted to call the action itself, but that's fine. I'll just name it the same name. Skybox 1024x1024. And so I hit record. Now it's going to record all the actions I do, and that way I can apply it to all the rest of them. So I'm going to simply go to image, image size. I'm going to turn off the aspect ratio, and I'm going to type in 1024. They're actually really close to that. That's really lucky. By 1024. 72 dpi is fine because we're dealing with pixels. And so I'll say OK. I'm going to go to File, Save, File, Close, and I'm going to stop recording. So now I can select this, go to File, Automate, Batch, and my source is going to be all the open files, so I can change that if that's not that. I want to make sure that this is set to what I just created, which it is, and I can say OK, and it's going to resize all of my images. Okay, and I'm going to actually do this one more time, creating a separate set of images here. So I'm going to open this up again, and I'm going to create a new action. So I want it to still be in this folder though, and I'm going to call this Open EXR. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change these images into the Open EXR file type. So I'm going to go to Image, Mode, 32 bits per channel. So that'll change that. I'm going to go to File, Save As, Open EXR, Save, set my compression to none, and hit OK, and then File, Close. Stop recording, and then we'll automate again. So Open EXR, and hit OK, and it's going to change all the open images to Open EXR. So I'll show you why I do that. So we're done with making the images that we need. Now we need to set it up so we can use it in Unity or whatever game engine. I'm doing it in Unity. So I'm going to go into my textures folder, which there's currently nothing in here, and I'm going to say right click, oh, come on, import new asset, and I will search for the assets I just created. So documents, well, that's weird. Okay, 3ds Max, scenes, Control Delete, Skybox, and I was hoping, oh, that's nice. The EXR ones are all going to be, they don't display in here, so that makes that easier. So I'm going to bring all those, oh, I can only do one at a time? Okay, there's a better way. I can just browse and drag them in. So search for my files again. Select all of my EXR images. and I can drag those into my scene. And then it'll import all of them in one shot, which is nice. So we wait for that. So there are my Skybox images. So I'm going to right click, go to Create, Material. I'll call this Skybox Cloudy Day, enter. Okay, so under my shader type, I want to change my shader to a Skybox cubemap. I don't know why I did cubemap, sorry. Skybox 6-sided. That's if I wanted to create a cubemap out of it, if I already had one. So now we can see my -x, -y, and all of these, and we can see the slots that they go in here. So if I've done everything right, this should all work nicely, so it'll probably work terribly, just knowing my luck. So I'm going to go +Z, so we can see where it's putting it here, -Z, +x, and -x, and then +y and -y, +y and -y. Okay, so it looks a little weird in here. I may have to worry about a little bit of the texture edges here, so I might have to look at that. But so now I've got my Skybox created. Now I need to apply it. So I just go to Window, Lighting. And I'm just going to drag this over here just so I have it. Skybox, and instead of the default, I want to find my one I created. Where is it? Skybox Cloudy Day. There we go. Actually, we have a small seam there, which I should be able to paint out pretty easily if that's an issue. But let's take a look and see how it actually looks. Actually, no, it's pretty good. I am getting some edges here, which, let me see what my image currently looks like. What might actually be happening, and this happens sometimes. Where is it? Skybox Cloudy Day Raw. With these layers, if I have alpha channels, it's saving that alpha channel info, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna just put that in the trash can. So if that ends up happening to where you get those seams in there, that's what it is the alpha channel here. The other thing I can do is delete any extra layers I have, because I've already got my things cropped here. So all I have to do is recrop, resave, and run my 2 actions, and it'll fix those. Let's go ahead and just try it with the top one and see if it fixed the one on top. So image, crop, file, save as, and this was Targa, and that was our top one, which was +y. Yeah. So save that. Hopefully I'm correct on why it's doing what it's doing. So +y, yeah. So now I'll just run my 2 actions here. So there's one. And I could do this as all one action also, but I don't always want to have EXR images, so that's why I did them as 2 separate. So +y, that one. Let's make sure the image size is right. Image size. Okay, and I'll run OpenEXR. And that will have updated this one. So I'll go back into Unity. I'll drag that back in. And we may not see it clear up just because the other images are going to have the same kind of thing happening. But I'm going to go ahead and play the game. So hit play so we can go full screen here and kind of see how that looks. Besides the seams, I want to make sure that the actual seams in between the images are actually correct. That's more important to me than this. This is an easy fix. Are we going to play? There we go. Okay, so I look around, and yeah, besides the lines that I'm getting there, the actual images themselves blend together really nicely. You can see there that the clouds match up and there's no sort of shift in them or anything like that. And it makes it a nice bright image. It's a pretty nice skybox, you know, minus the lines that are there. There's also no distorting, so as I look around I'm not getting, because this is basically put on a box, I'm not getting any, I don't want to get any distortion because these points are actually further away than the areas on the sides of the box. Just make sure we have everything set up correctly here so there's nothing else. So some of the other stuff that we can do is we can change the exposure, since these are 32 bits per channel, and you can see that the exposure actually changes how bright the scene is as well. That's what's nice about the OpenEXR. We could have simply just stuck with the Targa files and that would have worked, but we don't really have exposure controls in that case. So we can always kind of do that. We can also change the tint color here, so if you wanted to have a red sky you could do that. If you set it to white, it's going to really be blown out, but I can bring this down a little bit. Let's say, whoa, 0.5. Should be closer to what the actual image looked like if this is set to white. And then we have the rotation here, so we can shift where you know, the sky and the clouds and stuff are. And you can see this actually changes the shading inside the scene, which is kind of cool. Alright, so hopefully you found this very, very long tutorial to be informative and help you create your own skyboxes. I'd appreciate it if you give me some likes, and if you would, please subscribe because I've been posting a lot of videos. Please leave a comment if there's something you'd like to see in the video that maybe I didn't cover here, or something you'd like to see me do in another video. Thanks for watching.